The stage lights blazed as a thin boy in a worn-out shirt and faded jeans shuffled onto the stage. His shoes were scuffed, and his hair looked hastily combed, but his eyes carried a weight far beyond his years. The judges leaned forward curiously, exchanging quick glances as the boy adjusted the microphone. His hands trembled slightly, betraying the storm of nerves inside him. The host gave him a reassuring smile before slipping backstage, leaving the boy alone in front of thousands of people and countless cameras. Simon raised his eyebrow, his usual skeptical look, as he asked the boy his name and why he had come to audition. The boy's voice cracked slightly as he explained, I just want to share my music. It's all I have left after losing my dad." His words drew a hush across the audience. A soft murmur swept through the theater, hearts already tugged by his honesty. When Simon asked what he would sing, the boy whispered, "Hotel California." Some of the judges looked surprised, such a bold choice, such a difficult song for someone so young. Still, he gripped the microphone tightly, closing his eyes as though calling upon some unseen strength. The first strum of the background track echoed. The boy inhaled deeply, and suddenly, the theater fell silent, waiting. The crowd leaned in, sensing something special in the air. It was no longer just an audition, it felt like the beginning of something unforgettable. The music began, and with the very first note he sang, the room transformed. His voice wasn't polished in the way professionals trained for years, but it was raw, soulful, and drenched in emotion. Each word carried pain and love, echoing stories untold. The judges, initially skeptical, sat up straighter. Heidi placed her hand over her heart, while Sophia's mouth opened slightly in awe. The boy's voice soared through the famous opening lines, fragile yet powerful, like glass that somehow refused to shatter. His eyes stayed closed as if the lyrics weren't just a song, but a diary entry carved into his heart. Audience members began to wipe their eyes. A woman in the front row clasped her hands tightly as though holding on to the moment. Even Simon, known for his stoicism, tilted his head and studied the boy more closely, his usual frown softening. Every syllable painted an image: dusty roads, empty nights, and a longing for a home that no longer existed. The boy's father had introduced him to Hotel California years ago, and now he poured that memory into each note. It was as if his father was there on stage with him, guiding his every breath. By the time he reached the chorus, the audience was on their feet, clapping softly in rhythm, creating a wave of energy that lifted the boy higher. His voice, once trembling, now carried confidently across the hall. The boy's nerves melted away. He wasn't singing to impress anymore. He was singing to heal. As the boy moved into the middle of the song, the weight of his emotions began to break through. His voice quivered, not from fear, but from the raw intensity of memory. Each lyric seemed to pull something deep from within him. His mother, seated in the audience, buried her face in her hands, tears streaming uncontrollably. She knew how much this moment meant to him. The song had been his way of keeping his father's spirit alive. The camera zoomed in on Simon, whose eyes were glassy though he tried to maintain his composure. Howie leaned forward, his jaw resting on his fist, visibly touched. The boy sang with such conviction that it didn't feel like a cover anymore. It felt like a brand new story, reborn through his soul. Then came the high note, the one moment that could make or break his performance. He clenched his fists at his side, took a deep breath, and released a note that pierced through the theater like lightning. The sound was heartbreaking, yet liberating, a cry and a prayer rolled into one. The audience erupted into applause mid-song, unable to contain themselves. But the boy didn't falter, he kept singing, channeling every ounce of love and grief into his voice. His small body shook under the force of it all, but he didn't break. He stood firm, letting his music carry him. By the time he reached the final verse, his voice cracked, not from weakness, but from truth. And that was when the first tear rolled down Simon's cheek. The last note hung in the air, trembling and golden, as silence filled the theater. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The boy lowered the microphone, his chest rising and falling, sweat glistening on his forehead. His eyes remained shut, as though afraid to open them and break the spell. Then, the theater erupted. The crowd leapt to their feet in thunderous applause, many still wiping their tears. People hugged strangers, caught in the shared magic of what they had just witnessed. On stage, the boy finally opened his eyes to see thousands cheering for him. His lips quivered into the faintest smile. At the judges' table, emotions overflowed. Sophia dabbed her eyes with a tissue, her voice trembling as she said, "That was not just a performance, that was a piece of your soul." Heidi nodded furiously, unable to speak at first, before finally whispering, "You made us feel every single word." Simon sat unusually quiet. His hands were clasped tightly, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, voice husky, "I've been doing this for a long time, and very rarely do I feel something that I will remember for the rest of my life. You just gave us one of those moments." The boy covered his mouth in shock, tears forming in his own eyes. He looked over at his mother in the audience, who stood crying, blowing him a kiss. The theater seemed to hold its breath again. Something was about to happen. Simon glanced at the other judges, then back at the trembling boy on stage. Slowly, he stood up, a rare move that made the audience gasp. "This," he said softly, his hand hovering above the golden buzzer, "is what this show is all about." The crowd roared, already sensing what was coming. The boy's eyes widened, hands trembling as tears spilled down his cheeks. Then, smash! Simon slammed the golden buzzer. Confetti exploded from above, cascading like a shower of stars. The boy dropped to his knees, overwhelmed, covering his face with his hands. His mother ran forward, held back by security for a moment before being allowed on stage. She wrapped him in her arms as golden paper rained over them both. The audience was deafening, chanting his name. The judges stood, clapping furiously, their own faces wet with tears. Heidi and Sophia clapped above their heads, Howie shouted words of encouragement, and Simon simply smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up his usually stern face. For the boy, time stood still. He wasn't just a nervous kid on stage anymore. He was proof that pain could be transformed into beauty, that loss could turn into strength, and that music could bridge the gap between broken hearts and healing. As the confetti settled, the boy whispered through sobs, "This is for you, Dad." The cameras caught the moment, etching it into history as one of the most unforgettable performances ever seen. And in that moment, everyone in the theater knew, they had just witnessed magic.